morning sunlight came softly through the window, spilling warmth across the small apartment. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed, her thoughts scattered like pieces of a puzzle. Life had not been easy lately, and the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Every day felt like a struggle to balance work, bills, and the quiet hope that something better might come. She had dreams that felt just out of reach and a heart that longed for connection, though she rarely allowed herself to imagine it. Across the city, he was beginning his day in a very different way. The sound of the coffee machine filled the kitchen as he prepared for the hours ahead. His life had its own challenges, but he faced them with quiet determination. The routines of work and daily life often left little room for anything unexpected. Yet he carried a sense of hope that something meaningful might appear at any moment. He had grown used to living carefully, observing life from a slight distance, always ready to lend a hand or offer kindness, yet rarely allowing himself to be noticed in return. The city moved around them, a river of people flowing in every direction. She made her way to the small bookstore she loved, seeking a brief escape from the weight of her responsibilities. The scent of old pages and polished wood gave her comfort. She wandered slowly between the shelves, letting her fingers brush against the spines of books she might one day read. She enjoyed the quiet moments that allowed her mind to wander beyond the limits of her everyday life. He happened to enter the same bookstore that morning. His attention was drawn to the new arrivals section, where stories of hope, adventure, and love were neatly displayed. He enjoyed moments like this, when the world slowed down just enough for him to notice small details. His eyes moved over the titles, and for a brief instant, the noise of the city outside faded into nothing. Their paths crossed near a table filled with novels that neither had yet explored. She reached for a book at the same moment he did. Their hands brushed, and both froze for a second. Neither had expected the encounter, yet something unspoken passed between them in that brief touch. She looked up, noticing him for the first time, and he returned the glance with a soft, careful curiosity. It was a quiet, almost imperceptible moment, yet it carried a weight neither fully understood. Apologies were offered in a small, almost shy way, and she stepped back slightly, letting him take the book. He smiled, a gentle gesture that did not demand anything in return. She smiled back, and just for a moment, the world seemed lighter. They began to browse the shelves, occasionally glancing at each other, noticing shared interests in the types of stories they gravitated toward. The conversation had not yet begun, but a sense of familiarity lingered, as if they had known each other in some other time or place. As they wandered through the aisles, she noticed how he seemed to take care in choosing each book. There was a quiet thoughtfulness in the way he examined each title, a patience that reflected something deeper. She wondered briefly about his life, imagining stories that might be hidden behind the calm exterior. At the same time, he noticed the gentle focus in her eyes, the way she seemed fully present in the moment, yet carrying a subtle layer of sadness. There was something about her that drew him in, quiet strength wrapped in vulnerability. The bookstore felt like a small world of its own, separate from the bustling city outside. She picked up a book she had been wanting to read, holding it close for a moment before placing it back on the shelf. He noticed the choice, and without thinking too much, offered a quiet comment about the story. It was a simple remark, yet it opened a door. They began to speak softly about the books they loved, the stories that had left marks on their hearts, the authors whose words had once comforted them in difficult times. Time moved differently there. Hours could have passed, or only minutes. It was impossible to tell. She found herself laughing lightly at something he said, surprised by the warmth in her own voice. He felt a rare ease in her presence, a sense that he could be himself without pretense. Their words flowed naturally, a gentle dance of connection that neither had anticipated. In that moment, the possibilities of what might come felt endless, even though both knew little about the other's life. At one point, he offered to show her a section of the store she had not yet explored. They walked together, their conversation continuing quietly, each learning small details about the other. She discovered that he enjoyed early mornings and quiet moments, that he found comfort in simple things, that he had a way of seeing beauty in the everyday. He noticed that she had a deep curiosity about the world, a kindness that extended not just to people, but to ideas, to stories. Two moments that others might overlook, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Neither tried to force connection, yet it grew naturally, like a plant reaching toward sunlight. Each shared smile, each small gesture of attention, seemed to weave an invisible thread between their hearts. She felt hope stir within her, a fragile but persistent sense that something good might be waiting. He felt a spark of anticipation, a quiet excitement that reminded him of dreams he had long put aside. Eventually, the afternoon began to drift toward evening. The light in the bookstore softened, casting a golden glow across the wooden floors. She realized she had lost track of time, and a small sense of reluctance filled her heart. She did not want the moment to end, yet she knew the world outside would continue, demanding attention and care. He seemed to feel the same, pausing for a moment as if to capture the feeling in memory before stepping back into the reality of daily life. Before leaving, they exchanged a brief conversation about returning to the store, to explore more books together, to continue the dialogue that had begun so unexpectedly. There was no pressure, only a quiet hope that paths would cross again. She walked away with a lighter step, a small smile on her lips, and a warmth that had not been there before. He watched her leave, carrying with him a sense of possibility, feeling that something important had just begun. The city outside seemed unchanged, yet everything felt different. Ordinary streets and familiar buildings now held the potential for extraordinary moments. She went home and reflected on the encounter, thinking about the gentle smile, the shared laughter, and the way someone had truly seen her, even if only for a few hours. He went home and thought about her curiosity, her kindness, and the way she had seemed fully present in a way that made the world feel brighter. Night arrived, and the apartment was quiet once more. She prepared for sleep, but her mind lingered on the day, replaying moments that had left a mark on her heart. Each memory was a thread of hope, weaving a tapestry of emotions she had not expected to feel so soon. He, too, lay awake, thinking of her laughter, the warmth in her eyes, and the subtle connection that had formed between them. Neither could predict what would come next. They both sensed that the encounter was only the beginning of something meaningful. In the quiet of the night, dreams carried whispers of possibility. She imagined walking through the bookstore again, sharing stories and discovering more of the world together. He imagined conversations that might unfold, moments of understanding, and the gradual unfolding of a bond that could grow stronger with each meeting. There was no rush, only the gentle unfolding of hope and curiosity, the sense that life could offer something beautiful if one remained open to it. The morning arrived once again, carrying the promise of new beginnings. She prepared for the day with a renewed sense of energy, a quiet excitement that had been absent before. He went about his routine with a sense of anticipation, remembering the connection that had touched him deeply. The city moved around them, busy and indifferent to the moments that mattered most. Yet in their hearts, a new story had begun. The first part of their journey was simple yet profound. It did not require grand gestures or dramatic events. It existed in the gentle moments of recognition, the shared laughter, and the unspoken understanding that they had encountered something rare. There was hope in their eyes, an emotion in their hearts, an invisible thread that promised the unfolding of a beautiful story, one that neither could yet fully comprehend, but both were eager to explore. And so, life continued, ordinary yet charged with possibility. The encounter in the bookstore became a memory that lingered, a seed of connection waiting to grow. In the quiet spaces of their daily lives, thoughts of each other found their way into their minds, leaving traces of warmth, curiosity, and longing. This was only the beginning, the first chapter of a story filled with hope and emotion. A story that promised to unfold in ways that neither could yet imagine. The morning arrived quietly, with soft light spilling into the small apartment. She moved with a sense of purpose, though her thoughts kept returning to the bookstore, to the gentle presence that had seemed to touch something deep inside her. There was a warmth she could not name, a feeling that made ordinary routines feel lighter and more meaningful. She carried a quiet hope with her, the hope that the unexpected meeting was not just a fleeting moment, but the start of something deeper. He too began his day with a sense of anticipation. The city moved as it always did, with its familiar noise and hurried steps. Yet he noticed the world differently now. Colors seemed brighter, small gestures from strangers carried a hint of meaning. And even the routine of making coffee felt like an opportunity to pause and appreciate simple moments. Thoughts of her lingered, not as a distraction but as a gentle encouragement to live more fully in the present. A few days passed before they saw each other again. The bookstore seemed smaller now, more intimate, as if it existed only for them. She walked slowly between the shelves, eyes scanning titles, yet her mind replaying the previous encounter. The way he had smiled, the calm patience in his movements, the way conversation had felt natural and unforced, all returned to her thoughts. She wondered if he would notice her, if he would feel the same pull. And a small flutter of excitement rose in her chest. He entered the bookstore at the same time. Carrying a sense of casual expectation, unsure if she would be there. When their eyes met, a quiet recognition passed between them. It was like seeing a familiar landscape for the first time in years. Their smiles were gentle, free of pretense, and without needing words, they began to explore the aisles together. Each step felt purposeful yet relaxed, as though they were walking in a space where time had softened. Conversation began naturally. First about books, then slowly drifting into personal stories. She spoke softly about her favorite authors, about moments in life when stories had offered comfort or guidance. He listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine curiosity without prying too deeply. There was a rhythm to their exchange, a sense of ease that only comes when two people feel safe and understood in each other's presence. She noticed the small details about him, the way his eyes lingered on certain titles, the subtle gestures that revealed patience and thoughtfulness. She felt drawn to that care, to the quiet attention he offered without expecting anything in return. It was refreshing, almost unfamiliar, and she realized that the sense of peace she felt around him was rare. She did not often allow herself to feel this way, yet here, in this quiet corner of the world, she did. He noticed her focus, the way she seemed both attentive and lost in her own thoughts at the same time. There was a gentle curiosity in the tilt of her head, the subtle movements that revealed her character without needing words. He felt a desire to know more, to understand the layers beneath the surface, yet he was careful not to rush. There was a beauty in the pace, in the way connection could develop gradually. With patience and care, the hours passed unnoticed. They explored different sections of the store, occasionally picking up books to discuss, occasionally letting silence settle comfortably between them. Each small moment was a thread weaving them closer together. She laughed softly at his observations, and he found himself smiling at the way her face lit up in response. There was an energy that had no need for dramatics, only the simple acknowledgement of mutual interest and growing trust. At one point, they sat on the small wooden bench near the poetry section. The shelves rose around them like quiet walls of possibility. She shared a passage from a book she had loved, and he listened, absorbing not just the words but the emotion behind them. In that moment, words became more than communication. They were a bridge connecting hearts, an invisible thread that pulled them closer. He offered his own thoughts, gentle reflections that showed he had been paying attention. She felt a rare comfort in being understood. Days turned into a week, and they began to see each other more regularly. Sometimes it was in the bookstore, sometimes walking through quiet streets or sitting in small cafes. Each meeting was unhurried, allowing them to grow accustomed to each other's presence. She found herself sharing details she had once kept to herself, moments of struggle, dreams, and the small joys of life. He shared in turn, revealing layers of thoughtfulness, small habits, moments that had shaped him. With each meeting, their bond deepened. It was not marked by grand declarations or dramatic gestures, but by the consistency of presence, the reliability of attention, and the quiet affirmation that they cared. She noticed how he remembered details from previous conversations, small things that made her feel seen. He noticed the way she listened, truly listened, giving her time and space to express herself without judgment. Even ordinary days gained significance. A walk through the park became a shared adventure, a chance to talk about hopes for the future or to simply enjoy silence together. A cup of coffee became a ritual, a quiet pause to reconnect amidst the busyness of life. Each experience, no matter how small, was infused with emotion, hope, and the subtle joy of discovering someone who could touch the heart so easily. Challenges began to appear. Small at first, but enough to test their growing connection. Conflicting schedules, responsibilities, and moments of doubt crept in. She sometimes wondered if she was imagining the depth of their bond, while he worried about whether she felt the same intensity he did. Yet instead of allowing distance to grow, they found ways to support each other. Simple messages, shared stories, and brief encounters reinforced the connection. It was not perfect, but it was real, and they valued that authenticity above all else. One afternoon, they found themselves walking by a quiet river. The water moved gently, reflecting the sunlight in a way that seemed to soften the world. She spoke about the difficulties she had faced recently, the moments when hope had felt distant. He listened quietly, offering gentle encouragement, not trying to fix anything but simply being present. She felt a sense of relief, the weight of burdens lifted by the simple act of being understood. He too felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing he could offer comfort without expectation, and that their bond was strengthened by honesty and empathy. As days continued, the emotional connection became more evident. They noticed the subtle ways they thought of each other when apart, the anticipation of the next meeting, and the quiet excitement that lingered in ordinary moments. Laughter, conversation, and shared silence became the fabric of their growing relationship. Each moment was valued, each gesture noted, each connection deepened with care and attention. They began to discover small surprises about each other. She found that he had a way of noticing beauty in the mundane, a talent for finding joy in simple moments. He found that she had a resilience that inspired hope, a gentle strength that made even difficult days feel lighter. These discoveries did not come all at once, but unfolded naturally. Like a story being revealed page by page, the week ended with a quiet evening at the bookstore. The light had softened, casting warm hues across the shelves. They stood together near the entrance, reluctant to part ways, yet aware that life required them to return to routines. There was a brief pause, a moment of shared understanding that went beyond words. Without any need for declaration, both felt the bond that had formed. A connection rooted in care, attention, and the hope of something lasting. As she walked home, the city seemed brighter, the ordinary streets now filled with promise. He returned to his apartment with a quiet sense of contentment. The world outside unchanged, yet profoundly different for the presence of someone who had touched his heart. Thoughts of the other lingered, weaving themselves into dreams and hopes for the days ahead. The second part of their journey, it's marked not by dramatic events, but by subtle growth. They learned to trust, to be patient, and to value the small, meaningful moments that built a connection. There was a quiet joy in knowing someone truly saw them, a sense of hope that had been absent before. The bond was becoming more than curiosity. It was becoming a gentle, steady foundation for something beautiful. Even as life continued with its challenges, they carried the experience with them. Ordinary days were transformed by the knowledge that a meaningful connection existed. That laughter, conversation, and shared presence could bring warmth and hope. The emotional depth was growing, slow but undeniable force that promised the unfolding of a love story full of hope and emotion. And so, the days passed, each one building on the last, each encounter deepening their connection. The quiet moments, the shared smiles, the thoughtful words, and the growing trust all combined to create a sense of something extraordinary within ordinary life. Their hearts were opening carefully and gently to the possibilities that lay ahead. This part of the story was about discovery, growth, and the quiet strengthening of bonds. It was about hope found in shared presence, emotion nurtured in gentle connection, and the realization that love could begin in the simplest, most human ways. Each step, each conversation, each shared smile was a building block for the chapters yet to come. Life continued in its usual rhythm. But the connection they had built began to face its first real tests. She had responsibilities that weighed heavily on her. Work, family, and obligations often demanded attention, leaving her with little time for herself. Even though she cherished the moments spent together, there were days when exhaustion made her retreat inward. She wondered if her growing feelings were wise, whether she could allow herself to be so open when life was already so complicated. He faced his own challenges. Work required long hours and unexpected demands. Sometimes plans had to be canceled, sometimes messages went unanswered. Not out of lack of care, but because life demanded presence elsewhere. He felt frustration at his own limits, knowing he wanted to give more, to be present without compromise. Yet the reality of life often intervened. Each time he could not meet her or respond quickly, he felt a small ache. A reminder that connections sometimes required patience beyond his comfort. Their encounters became less frequent, though each one remained meaningful. The bookstore still held the magic of first meetings, yet the time together was tinged with a quiet tension. She noticed how icily distraction crept into his gaze when he was thinking of other responsibilities. He noticed the subtle sighs she tried to hide, the moments when her attention seemed elsewhere. Both wanted to maintain the growing bond, yet the pressure of daily life introduced moments of doubt and uncertainty. One afternoon, she arrived at the bookstore only to find that he was not there. She had expected to see him as they had agreed earlier, yet he had been delayed. Waiting brought a mix of emotions. She felt disappointment, wondering if he had chosen other priorities. At the same time, she reminded herself that life sometimes interfered, that care was shown not only in presence, but in patience and understanding. She wandered through the aisles, touching book spines, thinking of him, hoping he would arrive. He rushed through his tasks, aware that he had promised to meet her. Unexpected delays had caused a cascade of interruptions. He worried about disappointing her, about how absence might be interpreted. Each step he took toward the bookstore carried the weight of both anticipation and unease. By the time he arrived, she had already begun to doubt if he would come. When their eyes met, there was relief on both sides, a small smile that acknowledged the difficulty of life and the importance of making the effort over time. Small misunderstandings began to surface. Words spoken lightly were sometimes interpreted differently. A delayed message became a worry. A forgotten detail became a moment of tension. They were learning not just about each other's personalities, but about how life could interfere with connection. Emotions ran deeper than before, and with that depth came sensitivity. Both felt the pull of care, but also the fragility of early trust. Realizing that love required patience as well as presence, she struggled with moments of self-doubt. She wondered if her feelings were too intense, if she expected too much too soon. The reality of her own responsibilities pressed in, and she questioned whether it was possible to balance life and growing affection. Yet every time she thought of him, there was warmth and hope, a reminder that connection brought light even in the darkest days. She resolved to be careful but open, to nurture the bond without losing herself. He faced similar introspection. He worried about whether he was giving enough, whether life would allow him to be consistent, whether his feelings were truly understood. The thought of losing the connection he had begun to cherish brought unease. He reflected on the moments they had shared, the laughter, the quiet understanding, and the hope that this was the start of something lasting. He realized that effort mattered as much as emotion. That connection required patience and dedication. External challenges began to appear as well. Unexpected events at work created long days and exhaustion. Family responsibilities demanded attention, sometimes creating conflicts in scheduling. She faced personal difficulties that occasionally made her withdraw, leaving him unsure how to respond. These moments tested not only patience, but trust, teaching both that connection could be resilient yet delicate. Each challenge became a lesson in understanding, compromise, and the necessity of empathy. One evening, they met at a small cafe, choosing a quiet corner to escape the noise of the city. Conversation was slower than usual, punctuated by pauses where unspoken thoughts hung in the air. She spoke of a day that had been particularly exhausting, and he listened, offering comfort not through words alone but through gentle presence. He spoke of challenges he faced, of responsibilities that weighed heavily, and she offered encouragement, a steady reminder that they were there for each other even in difficult times. A misunderstanding arose over a small detail. He had made a plan without realizing it conflicted with her own obligations. She felt overlooked, he felt guilty, and for a moment tension filled the space between them. Yet instead of allowing frustration to take over, they spoke honestly. Words were chosen carefully, each trying to express concern and care without blame. Through that conversation, they learned about boundaries, expectations, and the importance of communication. The moment of tension passed, leaving a deeper understanding and a stronger sense of trust. Challenges were not always grand. Sometimes they were subtle, like moments of fatigue, stress, or worry that prevented full presence. Sometimes they were doubts that arose quietly, testing resilience and patience. Yet, in every challenge, they found small victories. A reassuring word, a gentle smile, a simple act of attention became reminders that connection was worth effort. Each trial reinforced that love was not only about joy and laughter, but also about presence in moments of difficulties. She began to notice the way he adapted, the quiet ways he ensured she felt seen, even when life interfered. A text sent at the right moment, a remembered detail from a previous conversation. A brief but meaningful gesture of care, all conveyed attention and affection. She realized that love was not only expressed through grand acts, but through consistent presence, empathy, and understanding. These moments, though small, built a foundation stronger than either had anticipated. He noticed her own resilience. Even in moments of fatigue or worry, she remained present, engaged, and caring. Her strength in managing life's challenges impressed him, and he found himself drawn to her determination and grace. He realized that connection was a mutual effort, a dance of giving and receiving, where attention, patience, and understanding mattered more than perfect timing or uninterrupted presence. They learned to navigate the balance between personal life and growing connection. Both recognized that life could be unpredictable, that responsibilities could interfere, and that patience was necessary. Yet they also discovered that consistent care, even in small gestures, could sustain and strengthen their bond. The challenges they faced became opportunities to deepen understanding, to test resilience, and to cultivate trust and hope even amidst difficulty. Its moments of joy remained. A shared laugh, a brief walk through the park, a conversation over coffee became reminders of the connection that had begun to blossom. These moments carried emotional significance precisely because they were not always guaranteed. Each encounter became a treasure, valued for the presence it offered, and cherished for the warmth and hope it instilled. The city around them continued in its usual pace. Unaware of the quiet drama of connection unfolding within its streets, people moved in hurried steps, carried by routines and responsibilities. While these two found meaning in moments often overlooked, life was imperfect, sometimes challenging, yet full of subtle beauty that emerged in presence, attention, and care. They discovered that hope and emotion could persist even amidst trials, that love could grow stronger when nurtured with patience. By the end of the third week, they began to notice the transformation within themselves. She felt more confident in allowing herself to trust, to hope, and to care. He felt more capable of patience, empathy, and consistency. Challenges no longer seemed solely obstacles, but also lessons in understanding, communication, and emotional depth. The bond they shared had been tested, and each challenge had brought them closer rather than pushing them apart. There were still moments of doubt, moments of worry, yet the foundation they had built proved resilient. They realized that connection was not a single grand gesture, but a series of small, intentional acts of presence and care. Each trial, whether minor or significant, became an opportunity to reinforce trust, deepen understanding, and nurture hope. The emotional depth of their bond grew as they learned to navigate life together. The week ended with a quiet evening walk. The streets were emptying, the city preparing for night, and they moved together at an unhurried pace. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences. She noticed how his presence brought calm to her mind, how the simple act of walking side by side created a sense of ease. He noticed her own quiet confidence, her resilience, and the way she carried hope even in moments of uncertainty. As they parted that evening, there was no need for grand words. A simple acknowledgement of care, a gentle smile, and a promise to meet again were enough. Both carried the weight of the day, the lessons learned, and the quiet satisfaction of having faced challenges together. Life would continue to present obstacles, yet they now knew that connection could endure, that love could be nurtured even amidst difficulty, and that hope was a constant companion when hearts were aligned. The third part of their journey had been marked by trials, by moments of uncertainty, and by challenges both internal and external. Yet it had also been a period of growth, resilience, and deepening connection. They had discovered that love required patience, attention, and understanding, and that true emotional depth emerged not only in joy, but in the ability to navigate difficulty together. And so, as night fell, both returned to their lives carrying hope, emotional strength, and a growing sense of bond. The story was far from complete, yet each challenge faced had added depth and meaning. They were learning that love was a journey, not a destination, and that the most beautiful moments often arose not in perfection but in the gentle persistence of care, presence, and shared humanity. The days began to feel lighter, even though life still carried its usual weight. After the challenges of the past weeks, she noticed a change within herself. There was a quiet confidence that had grown from knowing someone understood her, someone who had shared laughter, patience, and attention through both ordinary and difficult moments. She looked forward to the times they would meet, not as an escape, but as a continuation of something meaningful that had begun to take root. He felt the same shift within himself. The connection had survived the trials, and with each small act of care, he discovered that hope could thrive even in the midst of life's unpredictability. The city no longer seemed like a series of hurried moments, but a place full of potential for small, beautiful interactions. Even mundane tasks felt different because there was a presence in his life that reminded him that every day could hold meaning if attention was given with care. They began to spend more time together intentionally, choosing moments that allowed connection without distraction. Walks through the park became opportunities to notice details they had overlooked before: the sound of birds, the movement of leaves in the breeze, and the warmth of sunlight were shared experiences that deepened emotional bonds. Conversation flowed easily, touching on hopes for the future, reflections on past experiences, and the small joys that often went unnoticed in busy lives. She found herself opening up in ways she had not anticipated. She shared memories from childhood, dreams she had long kept to herself, the moments that had shaped her understanding of the world. He listened with patience, never rushing, never judging, only offering acknowledgement and gentle encouragement. In return, he shared his own experiences, vulnerabilities, and quiet dreams. The balance of giving and receiving created a rhythm of trust, intimacy, and emotional depth, if in the simplest gestures became meaningful. A hand brushing lightly against hers, a thoughtful question asked at the right moment, or a shared laugh over a small observation carried significance. They discovered that connection was not always measured by grand events, but by attention, presence, and the consistency of care. Each moment built upon the last, creating a foundation that was subtle yet unshakable. Challenges still arose, but the way they faced them had changed. Misunderstandings were resolved more quickly, and moments of absence were met with patience rather than doubt. Life continued to demand attention elsewhere, yet the bond had grown resilient enough to withstand interruptions and delays. Both had learned that emotional depth required flexibility, trust, and the ability to meet each other with understanding even when circumstances were not ideal. One afternoon, they found themselves at a quiet riverside, a place chosen spontaneously for its calm and beauty. The water reflected sunlight in gentle patterns. The breeze carried a soothing quality that seemed to slow the passage of time. They walked side by side, talking softly about small dreams and big hopes alike. She spoke about aspirations she had once thought unreachable, and he encouraged her with belief and support. He spoke about desires he had long held quietly, and she offered reassurance and interest without judgment. There was a moment when words became unnecessary. They stood together on the edge of the river, watching the light shift across the surface. A shared sense of understanding and presence filled the space between them. It was a moment that needed no explanation, no gesture, only the quiet acknowledgement that their hearts were aligned and that connection could exist without constant affirmation. The world outside might have been chaotic, but here together there was stillness, hope, emotional clarity. They began to dream together in ways that had not been possible before. Conversations moved from past experiences to future possibilities, from small hopes to grand aspirations. She imagined a life where challenges could be faced with support, where moments of joy could be shared without hesitation. He imagined a life where consistency and care could cultivate stability, warmth, and deep emotional connection. The shared visions created excitement and anticipation, reinforcing the sense that what they were building was rare and valuable. Even ordinary activities became opportunities for connection. Preparing a simple meal together, choosing books to read, sharing a quiet moment of reflection strengthened the sense of partnership. Each act, however mundane, carried the weight of intention and care. They discovered that emotional depth was not only about conversation or dramatic moments, but about the accumulation of small gestures that consistently demonstrated presence and understanding. There were also moments of reflection when they considered how far they had come. Each looked at the other and recognized growth, resilience, and the ability to navigate challenges. She saw the patience, attentiveness, and gentle thoughtfulness he offered, and it inspired trust. He saw the strength, empathy, and openness she brought to every interaction, and it inspired hope. Together, they realized that emotional connection was strengthened by awareness, intentionality, and mutual respect. Unexpected moments of vulnerability deepened their bond further. She shared fears that had lingered quietly in her heart, moments when uncertainty had threatened to overshadow hope. He responded with reassurance and empathy, not attempting to solve, but simply to be present. He shared moments of self-doubt and hesitation, and she responded with patience and understanding. Each act of vulnerability was met with acceptance, reinforcing trust and the understanding that emotional honesty was the foundation of connection. They began to notice how deeply they thought of each other when apart. Small reminders of the other's presence, a fleeting memory of a shared laugh, or an observation that sparked a conversation created a sense of continuity. Even in busy or challenging moments, the bond persisted, offering comfort, hope, and a reminder that connection could exist beyond immediate presence. Emotional depth was growing in ways that neither had fully anticipated. Subtle yet undeniable. One day, they sat together in the quiet corner of the bookstore, revisiting books they had once discussed. Conversation drifted from stories to personal reflections, and a sense of understanding grew. She realized how much he had noticed about her, the subtleties of her reactions, the quiet expressions of thought. He realized how much she had observed about him, the careful way he approached life, the kindness that marked even small gestures. Recognition of these details reinforced the sense of closeness as days continued. They began to make plans for the future, small steps that reflected commitment and intention. A walk to a park they had not explored, a shared visit to a local market, or planning a small weekend outing became ways to nurture connection. Each plan carried the implicit promise of care and attention, reinforcing emotional depth while creating anticipation and excitement. The act of planning together strengthened the sense of partnership, hope, shared vision. They also discovered the importance of patience and flexibility. Life still demanded attention to work, family, and responsibilities, and plans were sometimes interrupted. Yet instead of frustration, both embraced understanding. Absence was met with anticipation of reunion, and minor disappointments became opportunities to demonstrate empathy. Through these small lessons, the bond became resilient, anchored not in perfection but in the shared effort to nurture connection. One quiet evening, they found themselves walking under the soft glow of streetlights. Conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences that spoke of mutual understanding. She noticed the calm in his presence, the way he moved with confidence and care. He noticed the quiet joy in her eyes, the subtle way she expressed herself with honesty and warmth. These moments, simple yet profound, reinforced hope. In the growing sense of emotional intimacy, they began to express appreciation for each other more openly, though never excessively or dramatically. A small compliment, a gesture of acknowledgement, or a quiet expression of gratitude became natural parts of their interactions. The emotional connection was nurtured not through grand statements but through consistent, thoughtful recognition of the other's presence and value. Each act strengthened the sense of hope, trust, and mutual care. Through all these experiences, they realized that emotional depth was cumulative. Each moment, gesture, conversation, and reflection added layers to the connection. Hope and joy were reinforced by patience, empathy, and shared understanding. Even when life introduced challenges, the bond continued to grow, resilient and steady, grounded in care and attention. They discovered that love was not only an emotion but also a practice, cultivated in small, consistent ways. As the fourth part of their journey unfolded, they began to feel the weight of possibility. Each encounter, each shared moment, carried the implicit promise of a future that could be built together. She felt hope that went beyond fleeting excitement, hope grounded in trust, understanding, and mutual respect. He felt confidence that connection could endure. Confidence built not on certainty, but on consistent demonstration of care and empathy. By the end of this period, their bond had grown stronger, deeper, and more emotionally nuanced. They had navigated challenges, embraced vulnerability, nurtured understanding, and cultivated hope. Every small gesture, conversation, and shared experience contributed to a growing sense of connection that was both resilient and tender. Emotional intimacy had become a natural part of their interactions, a quiet but powerful force that guided their actions and shaped their shared experience. The fourth part of their story was about hope, growth, and emotional depth. It was about recognizing the importance of presence, understanding, and care in nurturing connection. It was about learning that love required patience, empathy, and consistent attention to both the needs of the other and the needs of oneself. It was about discovering that small gestures, thoughtful reflections, and shared moments could create a foundation strong enough to withstand challenges and. So, as the evening drew to a close, both returned to their daily lives, carrying hope, emotional richness, and the quiet excitement of possibility. The bond had deepened, the connection had strengthened, and the future held the promise of continued growth and shared joy. The story was moving closer to a turning point, a moment where decisions, commitment, and expressions of care would shape the next chapter of a love story. Full of hope and emotion, the days began to feel brighter with a sense of purpose and anticipation. After weeks of meetings, sharing moments, and growing closer, both realized that their connection had transformed into something deeper than either had expected. The challenges they had faced, the small trials, and the quiet moments of understanding had built a bond that was steady, resilient, and full of hope. Each encounter now carried a significance that went beyond words. A feeling that life had shifted in a meaningful way, she woke up one morning with a lightness she had not felt in a long time. The weight of doubt and uncertainty had lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence in the connection they shared. The thought of seeing him, of sharing time together, filled her with anticipation and warmth. There was a sense that something important had begun, something worth nurturing, and she approached each day with mindfulness and hope. He too felt a growing excitement, tempered with patience. The connection had become a part of his daily life, influencing the way he approached even ordinary moments. Tasks and responsibilities continued as usual, yet there was a subtle joy in anticipating their meetings, in reflecting on shared laughter, quiet conversations, and moments of mutual understanding. Life felt more vibrant, more meaningful. And even ordinary experiences held the potential for emotional richness. They began to plan time together with care and intention, making room for moments that allowed them to connect fully. Walks through quiet streets, shared visits to familiar cafes, and afternoons spent exploring parks became rituals of presence and attention. Each plan, no matter how simple, carried significance, reinforcing the emotional intimacy that had developed. They discovered that creating space for each other was an expression of care, and that hope grew naturally when nurtured by intentional acts. One day, they decided to spend a morning at the riverside, a place that had previously offered calm and reflection. The light danced across the water in shifting patterns, and the breeze carried a gentle comfort. They walked side by side, speaking quietly about the past, the present, and the possibilities of the future. She shared hopes she had once kept to herself, imagining what life could be with someone who truly understood her. He listened attentively, offering reassurance, encouragement, and the subtle affirmation that they were building something lasting. The conversation naturally shifted to the future, and both realized how deeply their lives were intertwining. She spoke of dreams that now felt reachable because of support and care. He spoke of aspirations that had seemed distant but now felt possible with someone to share them with. Each recognized the value of trust, patience, and mutual encouragement. The bond that had grown through small gestures, shared laughter, and quiet presence now carried a weight of certainty, hope, and emotional richness. Moments of vulnerability arose naturally, as they shared fears and uncertainties that had once been kept private. She admitted moments of hesitation, times when life had felt overwhelming, and he responded with quiet understanding. He shared moments of doubt, times when responsibilities had felt heavy, and she responded with empathy and reassurance. Each act of openness deepened the connection, reinforcing trust and highlighting the emotional depth they had cultivated together. Even ordinary activities were transformed by the presence of each other. Choosing a simple meal, preparing tea, or sitting quietly in the sunlight became shared experiences that strengthened the sense of partnership. They discovered that love was not only about grand gestures or dramatic events, but about attention, presence, and the steady demonstration of care. Every shared moment, no matter how small, contributed to the growing sense of emotional fulfillment as the days passed. Their bond became a source of stability and comfort. Challenges still appeared, as life demanded attention to work, family, and responsibilities, yet both approached these moments with patience and understanding. Absence was met with anticipation rather than doubt, and interruptions were handled with empathy rather than frustration. They realized that love was not fragile, but could endure when nurtured through trust, attention, and shared effort. They began to notice the subtle ways each influenced the other's daily life. She found herself more confident, resilient, and capable of hope, carrying lessons learned from his patience and care. He found himself more mindful, empathetic, and attentive, carrying lessons learned from her openness and quiet strength. The bond had become transformative, shaping not only their interactions, but also their individual growth and understanding of what it meant to love and be loved. One afternoon, they visited a small park that overlooked the city. The air was warm and calm, and they walked slowly along the winding paths, taking time to observe the world around them. Conversation flowed effortlessly, touching on memories, shared experiences, and reflections on the journey they had taken together. Each word, each gesture, each moment of silence reinforced the understanding that they had become an important part of each other's lives. A presence both comforting and inspiring, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. They reflected on the initial meeting, the growing connection, the challenges faced, the moments of hope that had carried them through. Each remembered the subtle gestures, the thoughtful acts, and the quiet reassurance that had nurtured the bond. They realized that the story of their connection was built not only on moments of joy, but also on patience, empathy, and the steady presence of Carré's sense of emotional fulfillment grew as they recognized the depth of their bond. She felt seen, understood, and valued in ways that had been rare in her life. He felt appreciated, trusted, and inspired in ways that gave meaning to ordinary days. Together, they discovered that love was a combination of hope, effort, patience, and presence, and that emotional richness came from the cumulative experience of small but meaningful moments. They began to talk about shared future experiences with a gentle excitement. Plans were not rushed or forced, but considered with care and intention. A trip to a nearby town, a visit to a gallery, or simply a quiet afternoon together became opportunities to explore life as a partnership. Each plan reflected the mutual desire to continue nurturing connection, to create memories, and to share life's joys and challenges together. The emotional intimacy they had cultivated became a source of strength. In moments of uncertainty, they found reassurance in each other's presence. In moments of stress, they found calm and shared reflection. In moments of joy, they found amplification in laughter and shared appreciation. The bond had become a living, evolving part of their daily experience. Providing hope, comfort, and a sense of purpose one evening, they returned to the bookstore where it all began. The familiar aisles and shelves now felt like a place of memory and significance. They wandered slowly, recalling moments of laughter, shared discoveries, and quiet conversation. Each detail, each corner, and each book seemed to carry a trace of their journey, a reminder of how far they had come together. The space had become a symbol of growth, hope, and emotional connection. They found a quiet spot to sit together. Words flowed naturally, reflecting on the lessons learned, the growth experienced, and the depth of feeling cultivated over time. She expressed gratitude for his presence, patience, and understanding. He expressed appreciation for her trust, openness, and quiet strength. Each acknowledgement reinforced the sense of fulfillment, the understanding that their bond had been nurtured with care, and the recognition that love was a journey of shared experience rather than sudden declaration.